let yourself come up with things that you're grateful for. It can be everyday things like that we can see, hear, walk. Use our hands. Or it might be funny things like loving coffee or chocolate or color. And then let yourself move just a bit, just kind of imperceptibly with the breath, kind of in unison, mind and body. And movements that are a little larger. Just any way your body wants to move. It's like, let your body have its way a bit. And slowly coming into standing. Just if that's comfortable, and if it isn't, you can do this seated, doesn't matter. And let yourself feel your feet and roll around on your feet. Roll your shoulders if you want, roll your arms. Sigh, if you want. I heard some sighs, that was good. And folding your hands one on top of the other over your hara here. Just slowly on the exhale, extend your arms out to the horizons and then back again. Working with the inhale, with the exhale, balancing on your feet. Feeling the expansiveness of this, like you're reaching out to the horizon. Like you're spreading wheat seeds or something like that. Such an open, welcoming gesture. And then sort of reverse it. So you're pulling in. So you're pulling energy in from the universe. Seeing how different this feels. And then rest a minute. And then on an inhale, raise your arms up and then circle them down. And bring them up again, your palms toward your torso. And time this with your breath too. So you inhale up. And this is the same opening gesture. And now try bending your knees with this. Like feeling the openness and the expansiveness. And then pause and reverse it. So you're pulling in and bringing down through this front open channel, this conception meridian. So you're breathing open and drawing down. And then rest. You can fold your hands over your heart. Just feel this part of your body. Feel your whole body. Okay, thank you. And then just kind of shake it out a little bit. So I'd like to talk tonight about the spread and development of Buddhism, which is very exciting and enlivening. In the preface of Joseph Goldstein's book, titled One Dharma, His Holiness the Dalai Lama wrote, Buddhism has evolved differently in different times and places, yet the essential Dharma remains the same. We can think of the historical Buddha as the trunk of a great big tree with three main branches, being Theravada, which was Americanized as insight, and the second branch, Zen or Mahayana, and the third, Tibetan or Himalayan or Vajrayana. These three branches of teaching were set out originally by the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, a prince of the Sakyan clan in 550 BCE. And as the teachings spread and flourished, different aspects of the original teaching got emphasized. The Dalai Lama continues, at the heart of the Buddha's teaching lies the idea that the potential for awakening and perfection is present in every human being, and that it's a matter of personal effort to realize that potential. In fulfilling this aim of awakening, what we need is compassion and concern for others, not self-centeredness. And whether you're Buddhist or not, these qualities are worth cultivating. The development of these branches is also referred to, as Matt did so well a few weeks ago, the three turnings of the wheel, which is a metaphor for the development of the different emphases in Buddhist thought. These turnings happened in India over centuries. The first, Theravada or insight, in 500 BCE, the second, Mahayana or Zen, in 100 BCE, and the third, the Vajrayana or Tibetan Himalayan, in 300 CE. So we've come into the common era here. I'd planned to talk about the similarities and differences between these three branches, and I'll save that for other times, except to say that Theravada, excuse me, that Theravada was mainly monastic, with memorizations from the historical Buddha set down in the Pali Canon. As Buddhism became more of a popular movement in the second turning, the Pali Canon wasn't repudiated, but was set aside in favor of living Buddhist masters who were considered more relevant. At different times, there have been resurgences of interest in the Pali Canon, and we seem to be in one of those periods now. There had been agriculture in India since around 6000 BCE. Around 3000 BCE, the Indus Valley civilization began along the Indus River and was roughly the same time as Mesopotamia developed along the Tigris-Euphrates and Egypt developed along the Nile. So these were three cradles of civilization, and they were fairly contiguous geographically. The Indus Valley civilization became highly developed, sophisticated agriculture, buildings, weights and measures for trading. The indigenous view, which was present then, Andy Olinsky calls a more organic spirituality, which seems to emphasize immanence, that existing within, rather than transcendence, which is outer. The primary symbol of the deity was feminine, and focus was placed on the inward journey, on what was unfolding every moment in the body and mind. Using asceticism, yoga, and meditation, the Shramanas, who were pre-Buddhists, explored the inner landscape of psychophysical experience. They were looking at what actually happened in the here and now. Around 2000 BCE, the Aryans moved into India from Central Asia and southern Russia. They were a fierce, warlike people who referred to themselves as noble to distinguish themselves from those they conquered. They were patriarchal. Their Vedic religion viewed the gods as out there in the heavens, and humans needed to invoke the gods through ritual, lots of sacrifices, and ceremony, as well as through hiring a professional class of priests who knew the special language for mediating between transcendent gods and earthbound humans. This Vedic religion became Hinduism, which led into Greek and Roman civilizations and into Judeo-Christianity. These two streams, the Vedic, then Hinduism, and the indigenous, represent two very different approaches to the human condition. Hinduism and Christianity see a spark of divinity within us, trying to escape its material prison to return to its transcendent home. The Shramanas and the Buddhists were more concerned with understanding, purifying, and optimizing the human mind and body. Classical Indian civilization today is the outcome of this synthesis. The two streams remained essentially different. An example of this is that one fall, when the Buddha was lecturing to the monks in the forest, there were leaves falling from the trees onto the ground. One of the monks asked the Buddha about a question about the existence of God. And the Buddha picked up 4 leaves, and he said, all I'm talking about are these 4 leaves. These 4, they were sapsara leaves. He said, I'm not talking about all the leaves in the forest. And so there were many ways and examples of how early Buddhism distinguished itself, blended, and used metaphors from the Hinduism that was already existing in India. And from the indigenous stream, there were commentaries on the suttas that contained folk tales. The Jataka tales are one example of these stories. They were stories of the Buddha's past lives. One of my favorites is a story about when the Buddha was a deer, and these were teaching tales that were passed on. So these dates again, to anchor the timeline, the agriculture in the Indus Valley was 6,000 BCE. The Aryans arrived in 2000 BCE. There were 2 streams, the Vedic, then the Hinduism, and the indigenous spirituality that already existed. The Buddha was born in 560 BCE and began distinguishing his teachings, which later became Buddhism, from Hinduism after his enlightenment. That was the first turning. The second was in 100 BCE, and the third in 300 CE. These 3 turnings happened in India. At the beginning of the Common Era, Buddhism started to spread, first down to Sri Lanka. And it was brought by the son and the daughter of King Asoka, who was a wonderful king who ruled all of, from the Himalayas down to Sri Lanka, and from Bangladesh all the way over to Afghanistan. And he had waged and won a terrible war. And he was so upset by that war and by the people killed, by the thousands killed in that war, that he vowed to have war no more and became a Buddhist. So then from Sri Lanka, it went over to Southeast Asia and up into Central America, Central Asia, along the trade routes into Afghanistan and into China. Now there were lots of Silk Road routes. There wasn't just one route. There were southern routes, there were northern routes, where both goods and ideas were exchanged. And Buddhism traveled into Tibet and into Japan through China, where Chan was existent, and then that translated into Zen. There's a great statue in India of the Chinese Buddhist monk Xuanzang, who crossed over the mountains from China to India and back in 645 AD or CE, bent over carrying stacks of the books of the Pali Canon strapped to his back. He walked 31,000 miles over the course of 17 years. Now, where he came in India was he came to Nalanda University. Nalanda was like a big Buddhist think tank that existed for 800 years straight until the Huns destroyed it. And in its peak, it had about 2,000 students and over 2,000 teachers and over 10,000 students. And you can still see the remains of Nalanda today. And in fact, a coalition of Asian countries opened the doors to a new Nalanda University in India in 2014 in a different location. So the teacher, Shinzen Young, characterizes Theravada in Southeast Asia as being a simple meal of rice and vegetables, which led up to the smorgasbord of Tibet, with the dogma, the beautiful rituals, the walls and ceilings painted, visualizations, costumes, sound, and then into Japan, where they took the sword of Zen to it and trimmed it back closer to its simpler roots. We can both feel rooted in one branch of Buddhism and learn a great deal from other branches. One time when I was on retreat at Southern Dharma, and you know, when you're on retreat, you usually spend an hour or two a day doing a work thing. And one work thing I like to do is either gardening or chopping vegetables. And, you know, they're feeding 50, 55 people or so. The kitchen is large, and they bring in these big stainless steel bowls of the vegetables that have to be chopped. So it might be squash, or it might be peppers, or, you know, cucumbers, whatever it was. But then the first day I was there, they brought in this big bowl of avocados. And I thought, oh, that's what I want to do. I want to do the avocados. Because every time I go to the grocery store, I can never tell if the avocado is ripe or not, if it's spoiled, if I'm too late. So this is my real chance to learn about avocados. Here's this huge bowl of avocados. So I'm really focused on the avocados. And the chef sees me and kind of reads my mind, how I'm lusting after the avocados. And he points to this large banner on the wall. And what the banner says is the great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. The Zen saying was very humbling. So actually, you had to pick a number, and then the number corresponded to the bowl you got. But later in the week, I did get the avocados. I knew when he pointed to that banner that the avocados were not mine. I felt so greedy. It was. So in all branches of Buddhism, mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom weave together. The framework of the relative and ultimate perspectives of reality hold divergent points of view, and the mind of non-grasping is the essential unifying experience of freedom. Thank you. So are there any questions or anything anyone wants to mention or add? That's better. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if this has anything to do with how insight meditation works or anything, but it's kind of profound to me, and it's an aha moment that I haven't shared with anybody. So maybe it'll be an aha moment for you too. Today, or just before I got here, I teach every Tuesday at a maximum security prison. I teach Buddhism. And so the guys in the prison, we had this wonderful conversation today, and it's just left me, I don't have any answers, but I'm just in awe that this came up. So we always do what's called the three jewels. We take refuge in the Buddha, we take refuge in the Dharma, and we take refuge in the Sangha. And we spent the afternoon talking about what that means. I'll spare you the long conversation. But one of the guys stopped and he said, "Do you think the Buddha takes refuge in us?" And wow. And we realized, yes, he does. And the way, or she does, or it does, and the way that that manifests itself is when we do the practice profoundly and we carry that practice throughout our day and others see us. They may not know we're Buddhists, they may not know anything, but carrying that, wearing that body, Buddha body, is the Buddha taking refuge in us. So it goes both ways.
Thank you. It's also the same with a tree that, you know, we can be looking at a tree like we were admiring last week, the beautiful oaks out there, but it's also interesting to think about the tree looking at us. That this is all a two-way street.
Hi, Jeanne and everyone. This is Matt beaming in from New Hampshire. I'm actually on a retreat up here, but I was so looking forward to Jeanne's talk that I could not miss it. And Jeanne, you absolutely did not disappoint. That was amazing. Just the way that you brought in the history of civilization, these threads around the Hinduism versus the Vedic context, and indigenous belief systems, and then, tracing the evolution of Buddhism geographically. I love how you mentioned it started in simplicity, and then the smorgasbord of Himalayan Buddhism, and then the sword of Zen, simplifying it. And I learned so much. And I guess a key takeaway for me is just understanding to a greater extent how the Dharma evolves, to suit different cultures and different time points in our history, other events that have gone on historically, and that influence the evolution of the Dharma. And I guess I had kind of previously and naively thought that, this evolution of the Dharma sort of happened in a bubble or a vacuum outside of its historical context and the other factors that you mentioned. So I just really want to thank you so much. And I'm going to be going back and listening to this recording so I can unpack all of the things that you said.
Thank you, Matt. And fun too, for each of us to at some time think about how, how our lives have come on a continuum, or what we've left and what we've gained. That like Andy Olinsky is real interested in the Shramanas and what they learned. And so, people might say, oh, wow, how Buddhism evolved. And he would say, oh, yeah, but also what we've left behind, that the whole continuum is totally important. So, any other last minute thoughts? Comments? Anythings? Okay, then I guess we'll have to eat cookies. Thank you.